I still had my own thoughts inside my head telling me I wasn't good enough. We got something serious to talk about. Today we're talking about how YouTuber Jeff Cavalier talks about the passing of Joe Lindner. Joe Lindner is a bodybuilder who's very popular on Instagram and YouTube. Now, I don't know Joe Lindner. I don't follow him or anything. I've only seen probably one video of his where he ripples his chest muscles. That's absolutely amazing, the muscle control that it requires. But we're going to talk more about something Jeff Cavalier says specifically here.
If you're regularly lifting weights and you have done so for a very long time, have you had pain in your life? Because I could tell you I have. I could tell you that the very reason that I got into this is probably the very reason that 98% of us have in the first place. And it was to combat some inner pain or struggle that we had as younger kids or teenagers, right? Trying to build up an external defense mechanism against whatever's hurting us. Lifting weights was our great escape. Never addressing necessarily what was painful inside, but giving us that external appearance that made us feel better about ourselves, that one day we hope our insides could catch up with.
The reason I want to talk about this is because he nails a point that hits very close to home for me. He talks about how he got into working out because he didn't feel like he was good enough. If what Jeff Cavalier says is true, if Joe Lindner, Jeff Cavalier, and I got into working out because we didn't feel good enough, then maybe I could understand a little bit of that. Now, I know his passing isn't self-inflicted, but I can understand where he was coming from, at least a little bit. In fact, 4-time classic Olympic physique winner Chris Bumstead admits that even he has a little bit of insecurity. He talks about how he got into working out and got his amazing body, but still, people hit real hard to his insecurity when they talk about his lisp.
And he said something like, oh wow, when you were a kid, like, girls must have been like, here's this good-looking, tall, jacked, handsome guy. Come up to him and then you open your mouth and they hear your voice in that lisp and they're like, what the fuck? And they're like, just fuck this guy, and they leave you alone. And I remember like feeling like a kid again, just getting this washed over embarrassment and just like feeling like fucking like 12 years, 15 years old again. And I was like, wow. Like, yep. I used to be teased a little bit for my lisp. And I'm like, that still is kind of in there a little bit.
He says it takes him back to when he was a kid and he wasn't feeling good about himself, which is probably why he got into bodybuilding in the first place. He wanted a physique that reflected a confident man instead of the insecure person he was on the inside. For me, I can understand that so well. I grew up an introverted nerd. In fact, some of my friends had hobbies that weren't aligned with what I liked. I loved superheroes, and this was before the superhero craze. So if you were wearing a Thor t-shirt, people would laugh their asses off at you. I loved that they stood up for people who needed help and they tried to do the right things to help people. So it triggered me whenever I saw bullies, and I wanted to stand up against bullies. One way that I thought I could do that by standing up to bullies is by becoming stronger and bigger, so I could personally stand up to them. I thought that if I worked out hard enough, I could work out, become stronger on the outside, bigger on the outside, and it would reflect internally. But that didn't happen. It didn't happen for a long time. I was raised around anger. There was yelling and violent outbursts in my home all the time, and that's all I knew. So whenever I felt that pain inside, it turned into anger and frustration, and I had to find a way to vent it out. And the only way I knew how was by lifting weights. So years later, when I went through a terrible breakup, the only way I knew how to handle that internal pain was by working out. I worked out twice a day, 2 hours a session, until my body was exhausted. And the only way I could make it through a day of work was by drinking copious amounts of caffeine. And that caffeine didn't leave my body until really late at night. So I'm laying in bed, late at night, unable to work out, unable to move, but still awake, dealing with the emotional pain that I had to handle, and I couldn't do anything about it. So no matter how much I worked out to try to relieve that pain, stress, anger, and tension, I could only work out so much before my body gave out. I still had to work, I still had to sleep, and within those hours, I still had my own thoughts inside my head telling me I wasn't good enough. And if you're going through this, you can't ignore it, because you can only ignore it for so long before it comes back. The internal pain will scab up, but it doesn't heal with time. You need to stitch it up so it heals properly. If you're going through internal pain, please find help. Find a way to live a life on your terms. Find a way to connect with other people. Find a way to help others. Find ways to feel better inside before it's too late. And until next time, guys, never give up on yourself.